All right, let's talk about the for each loop. But first, we need to talk about list. And before that, we need to talk about this library here. So again, using is a keyword that lets our program use the code inside of a library that has been published. So the system's a library, system.collections.generic is a different library. System allows us to use console.writeLine among many other things. The libraries have many data types. So list is a collection data type. Uh, Many objects, classes, with their different methods that we can call upon. And so this is absolutely necessary in order to be able to use a list. So if I comment this out, then it's going to error out on list. There you go. So it's not showing error, but it's unable to go through a list because it doesn't have the the library. It's not calling the library in order to use the list. So let's run this again, and now I have no issues because of that. So let's explain what's going on here. So again, I have my list of strings. This is necessary for the list. Uh, I decided to call it names. It's a list of strings, like I said. Here's my declaration for the list of strings. The new keyword is absolutely necessary, and then my declaration follows as this, just like this, and then because it's a list of strings, and we need the parentheses, and then I decided to give it some values right on the declaration, and then as you can see, then I'm calling on the add method to add more items to my list. So let's jump into the for each list. Yes, to the for each loop. So to quote the book, the for each loop in C# does all the work required to iterate to an enumerable collection for you. So list is an enumerable collection, and an enumerable collection, it's a collection of a data type that you can iterate through. And the for each loop is doing the iteration basically automatically. So if this is a little bit confusing, you can always come to the book. This is chapter 5, collections, under list and sequences, a little before the half point of the chapter. But this is beyond the scope of this class, but trying to explain the for each loop is a little bit complicated, and what I'm going to conclude is that the for each loop works because it works, and the inner workings of it are just a little bit confusing. But basically, the neural collections have a set of functions and code that the for each loop references behind the scenes. So we have the move next method or function that returns a boolean, so true or false, and then there's a current object, which the object is the data type. So in this case, the object is the string. So the for each loop references a current item, which it's element. So for each string named element in our list of strings names, meaning that the current element in the iteration gets a name element. So I'll just call it n to be a little bit less confusing. So the current element of our list, it's whatever iteration is going through. So the first time the for each loop runs, it'll be Luis. The second time will be Ed. Then the next Stuart, the next Jason, the next James, the next Ivan. And what's happening is that our for each loop is able to reference this move next once it's done with the current item. So at the end of the loop, our for each loop is able to call on the next item And if there is a next item, the for each loop knows to change the value of what it knows to be the current item. So the first time the for each loops, it knows that the current item is Luis, then it calls on the next item, and then it notes that it's Ed. Now, if when it calls on the next item, there is nothing left, then the move next function call, which is what I mean when it calls on the next item, is really just making a call to the move next. If the move next identifies that there's no items left, it returns a false. So this for each loop still depends on a true or false condition to run, just like all our other loops. And it's able to know which item is currently being iterated through. So we don't have our int I 0 to however long the list is, but we have our string n. Again, you can call this whatever you want to reference it inside of the for each loop, the block of code that belongs to the for each loop. But it's still very much like all our other loops. It's just that a lot of items are hidden, and that's because for each is a rather new invention. C# has been modified and made better over time, and new items are added to the language to make it easier for developers to adapt to it, to learn how to use it. And for each is one of those items. But the newer the code, the more complicated the behind the scenes, if you will. So for now, just know that it works. This is the syntax for each, and when you use it for each, you can reference the items on your list being iterated over this way. So string n, it's a temporary variable that will hold all the values in our list as we iterate through it. So when I run this code, I am calling writeLine on n, but n switches values. So n has the value of Luis at first, then Ned, then Stuart, then Jason, then James, then Ivan. And once it ran out of items inside the list, our for each loop knows to escape, to get out of there, and then I have another writeLine function call or method call, so we can see that it's able to exit that for each loop, and it's able to leave our code once it's run through it. I know this is very complicated. For now, I just expect you guys to be able to use this syntax, to be able to understand that and is iterating through the values of our list, that this works with integers as well, and with any sort of data types that we have a list of, it's going to function the same way. So if I just make a real quick change here, and now we're dealing with integers. So what's going to happen is still going to iterate through them 3, 2, 1, 100, 4, 1, and it's going to pretty much start at the beginning and then move towards the end, just like if we're going through the indexes from 0 to however many items there are. So I need to change this to an int because now we've changed the type of list, and then I'm still going to call it n because it's a number, and this console.writeLine, now it's calling on integers, not strings. And so I'm going to change this 19 to the end, a string called the end, or a string literal with the value of the end. So as I run through this, something happened. Let's see. Numbers. This is supposed to call numbers. Names does not exist anymore. Let's run it. All right, 3, 2, 1, 100, 4, 1. Perfect. So it's going sequentially as we would expect it, and then, you know, we get done with the items in the list. The for each loop exits, and then we move on to the next code, which is what we wanted. I know this is a little bit complicated. I don't expect to see for each much, but you will see them maybe in a quiz. Maybe you can always use it for your programs, for your projects, and it is available for you guys to use whenever we're using lists, which I hope that we can continue to use lists. So, all right, I'll see you guys in the next one.